Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting of the Scrutiny and Performance Committee of Perth and Kinross Council. Can I remind committee members to keep their microphones on mute throughout the meeting unless they're speaking? And for proceedings today, can I remind councillors and officers to, both in chambers and online, to use the chat box to attract my attention. Okay, I'm Colin Stewart, the Councillor Colin Stewart, the convener of the committee. I'm joined by Bailey Alistair Bailey, the vice convener, by Ms Malloy, the clerk to the committee, and by Mrs Simpson, the head of legal and governance services to the council. Can we move on to apologies? Clerk, please.
Thanks, convener. Yes, we have an apology from Councillor Smith with Councillor Illingworth substituting, and an apology from Councillor Shires with Councillor Duff substituting. So for those joining us online, when I call out your name, can you please confirm you're present? Councillor Illingworth.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Robertson.
Present.
Thank you. All members are present, convener.
Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Can I ask if there are any declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda today? No declarations of interest. Apologies. Councillor Forbes, you have a point of clarification about the agenda today.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I was wondering just why the annual performance report was here at Scrutiny, given that every single councillor had the opportunity to read, review and question it just a week or so back at full council.
Ordinarily, the report would have come to scrutiny first, but just because of timings of committees at this particular point, it was unfortunate that it did go to full council for consideration. However, the role and the function of scrutiny is different. This is an opportunity for scrutiny members to scrutinise and challenge and give feedback, and that can then be fed into action plans and improvements. So it's a different role, but timing is unfortunate in this instance, and that will be remedied going forward.
Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda is the minute of the meeting of the Scrutiny and Performance Committee of the 7th of June. Can we agree the minute of the Scrutiny and Performance Committee of that date? Agreed? Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is the outstanding business statement.
Sorry, convener.
Oh,
sorry to interrupt. I just noticed I've been slightly pedantic, but I'd given my apologies. I was substituted, but it does say in the minute that I was present. Oh, that's been picked up already. Thank you. It says Bob Braun substituting for Councillor Forbes, then it goes on to say A Forbes, then at the bottom it says apology, Councillor Angus Forbes.
Okay, so yes, you were present and substituted, so we'll get that corrected. Thank you, Councillor Forbes. So we'll move on to item 4, which is the outstanding business statement. Item 6. We had a presentation about moving from about the process of moving away from the business management improvement plans. So that item was completed. Item 14. We're looking for a date for that briefing. Item 15. we have a meeting scheduled to discuss the additional support needs provision presentation, which I think is tomorrow. Item 16, the elected member briefing note has been issued, so that is complete. Item 17 is marked as to be completed, but that briefing was issued last week, I think. So that is now completed, and items 18 and 19 are also completed. So can I ask if there are any questions? Councillor Duff.
Go try this one. I had a question about item 15, which is about the additional support needs. And just for my own interest, is this just about education or is it about wider issues like housing? Thank you.
I think it was Councillor Shires who'd raised the issue. I think initially it was certainly focused on the education aspects. We can certainly refer back to Councillor Shires and ask whether she wants the housing issue, any housing issues included as well.
Thanks, Convener, for that. I've got another question. Just carry on there. Yeah, it was about item 17 about the footfall. On behalf of Councillor Shires, who asked the question at the last meeting, can I just say how welcome the update in footfall data within town centres is. The recent note certainly provided interesting details around the footfall data currently captured by Springboard within Perth City Centre, and also detail on the progress being made with the extension of Wi-Fi tracking and the installation of 6 Wi-Fi nodes in Perth City Centre. And these two things will give us additional insights into the success of our initiatives and events and the flow of people in our city centre. One of the key initiatives that Councillor Shires had been pushing for was the ability to obtain footfall data in our towns as well as our city centre, and it's very welcome to see the proposal to install 2 footfall counters in each of the 6 towns across Perth and Kinross. I wonder if officers could please confirm the 6 towns that will receive footfall counters and what the approval process would be in terms of moving this forward. Thank you.
Executive Director Renton, please.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Duff, but I'll need to go back and find out a little bit more information for you and we'll get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks very much. If there's no other questions on the outstanding business statement, can we move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is Perth and Kinross Council's annual performance report for 2022-23. I'd like to ask Claire Mailer, who's our executive lead for strategic planning and transformation, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, councillors. The report before you today is our corporate annual performance report for 22-23. This is the first annual performance report following Council's approval of the new corporate plan in December of last year. And you will all be aware that the report was recently considered by Council at its meeting on the 30th of August. The report details performance against the indicators agreed within the corporate plan, and it provides an overview of activity and progress against each of our corporate priorities. This year, based on feedback, as you're aware, we've included links within the report to case studies, financial information, and a report about how we are performing against the best value themes set nationally. You will see that after having paused on reporting performance against targets and trend data during the pandemic years, we have introduced that this year. Although because the pandemic meant like-for-like comparisons weren't relevant, the trends recorded here are just the trends between the current and the most recent years. Of the 53 indicators included within the corporate plan. 57% are trending in a favourable direction, 23 are trending in an unfavourable direction, 6% remain static, and 15% are either not available or it isn't appropriate to make a like-for-like comparison if perhaps it's been a brand new indicator and there's no previous data. As part of our transition to new approaches to performance reporting, moving away from a service-based approach to wider organisational approach around our priorities, we have not produced service business management and improvement plans this year. And again, as advised at Council a couple of weeks ago, we're currently preparing a corporate delivery and improvement plan. A draft CDIP, Corporate Delivery Improvement Plan, will be presented to Council in October, and then it will be finalised once the budget is set. And this will really help to ensure that there's a clearer link between our improvement activities and our budget decisions. Finally, I would like to highlight that Appendix 2 provides an at-a-glance summary of our annual performance report. And again, this is part of our commitment to really improve public performance reporting. We've created the short video that you all saw at Council, again, to signpost people to our performance reporting information. So these different formats really recognise that not everybody wants to access information in the same way. So we've given different levels of detail and different opportunities. Myself and colleagues will be happy to take any questions that you have on the report. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mrs. Mailer. Can I ask if there are any questions on the report? Councillor Forbes first.
Thanks, convener. Claire, I was looking at page 32, and it's the section about employers that are signed up as living wage employers. And although 91 to 97 is definitely moving in the right direction, 97 still seems like a relatively small number. Do you happen to know what that is as a percentage of employers in Perth and Kinross, and what can we do to encourage more people to take this scheme up?
Ms. Mailer.
I don't know, is Alison Seggy on the call? She's right, she's off. Apologies, I don't have it as a percentage in terms of that figure, but we will arrange to get that information to you. What I would also say is that we're working very closely with businesses. Often the figure is lower than the actual number of employers that are paying the living wage, and there's work that is underway with local businesses at the moment to ensure that more people sign up. So there is a work in progress, but we will get more detailed information out following committee today.
Thank you. Apologies, Councillor Allen. My chat wasn't keeping up, so you were actually first. So on you go.
Thank you, convener. On page 28 of the report, it's about priority tackling poverty, and I see the third bullet point talks about through Home First. We minimise the number of children living in temporary accommodation and continue to be one of the leading authorities in Scotland in this area. That's brilliant news. It's good to see that we're performing particularly well in that area. In reducing the number of children in temporary accommodation, how many children do we have currently in temporary accommodation, and how are we managing to manage those figures down? Thank you.
Director End.
Yep, thank you, convener. I don't have the exact number, Councillor Allen, and we can get that to you, but it has been a very, very clear focus for the service and the council as a whole, because the service really recognised the importance of making sure that young people have a stable home. But we obviously have been experiencing a rise in homelessness, just as it has been nationally. So there may be some more than we would have wanted, but I don't know the exact number, but we'll get that to you.
And your next question, Councillor.
My next question is on page 38. Just allow me to get to it. You caught me on that. Page 38, it talks about superfast broadband. It's good to see that we're working with commercial suppliers to connect Perth and Kinross households to superfast broadband. Do we know where we are with achieving the R100 in Perth and Kinross, and how much of this work with the 20 commercial suppliers is actually focusing on providing a decent broadband service in some of our more rural areas? Thank you.
Director Renton.
If you could bear with me 2 seconds, I don't have all the detail that Councillor Allen is asking for, but I know that through TCTDO funding, we have taken huge step forward. And in terms of the R100 programme, then there are a number of organisations that are working to support that out with BT. The officer who's responsible for that, Graham Pinfield, is more than happy to have any contact from any elected member seeking further information about the details for their wards. I know that he's been very active in trying to support Ward 3, for example, on one of the elected, Ward 2, and one of the elected members in Ward 2 in terms of rural broadband. And if I can go back very quickly to one of the questions that was asked earlier, I don't have the percentage in terms of businesses that pay the living wage, but we are aware that there are a number more who don't officially tell us that they are, but they are paying that. So the figure that we've got is on the low side anyway.
Okay, okay, thank you. Next is Vice Convener Bailey.
Thank you, conveners. I've got 2 questions. They're both about page 35 of the document pack, but I'll address them separately because they're on different sections there. The first one is the one that I think we rehearsed at full council regarding the percentage of council fleet vehicles that are electric or other zero direct carbon fuel technologies. Just wondering if the officer team has the figures to hand about specifically whether any electric passenger vehicles got replaced with internal combustion vehicles within that number, because the percentage could move because of that happening. So wondering if we have that specific detail yet, please. Thanks.
Director Renton.
We have 17 out of our 160 passenger vehicle fleet that are electric vehicles. There was a Scottish Government grant that was available for leasing, and when that grant came to an end, unfortunately, we had to return the lease cars. As I said at Council, then we are bringing forward a paper in terms of our electric vehicle strategy, and we're hoping to have that to committee in November.
And then just on that specific point, please, have we bought any or have we taken on leases of any internal combustion cars to replace those 17, please?
I think yes, but I don't know the total number for that. But that's just been unfortunate. It's been because obviously electric vehicle cars are more expensive, and because we had that lease. But that will all be covered through the policy that we're bringing forward.
Okay, I'd appreciate some specific numbers on that when they're available, please. The next question I had was about actually the row below, the percentage of housing meeting the energy efficient standard 2 for social housing. We're making some progress there. It's good to see that progress. We're up to 6.6% now, and the narrative mentions that mostly that's coming from either deep refurbs or from new builds. Are there any plans or anything in the budget to go further than that and really start cutting into the remaining, I guess, 93 odd % that are not meeting that standard? Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Convener. We're, as you say, we're making good progress, and the council stock remains on track to meet the EPC band B and band D or higher by 2025. Out of the total housing stock, only 400 properties require now some work to meet that standard. We continue, to work with our tenants to ensure that where we can, we do that. But it is a commitment that we will be working very hard to deliver.
Thank you. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I just wanted to focus on pages 38 and 39 of the paper, which narrates the progress being made in developing a resilient, stronger and greener local economy. There are a number of good news points that have been made here around, in particular, the progress being made on the Crosstay Link Road, which is progressing on schedule, or was at the time of the report. Also, the developments in relation to Perth Eco Innovation Park, which was, of course, the subject of a planning application last week. The progress with grants for city and town centre retail hospitality premises improvements, 36 of them were granted in the year. I wanted to just ask a question in relation to the Christmas lights, which returned happily after the pandemic last year and attracted 68,000 visitors. I wonder if officers could tell me where that sits in relation to previous attendance figures. Was that an improvement or not? And also if they could possibly update, if there is any update, on the Crosstay Link Road and the Perth Museum project, which also has apparently now completed. Thank you.
Director Renton.
Fiona Robertson's also in attendance, so if Fiona can give you the update in terms of Perth Museum. In terms of the Crosstay Link Road, yes, we continue to be on schedule, and I'm trying to open up bits of road as we can as they are completed. In relation to the Christmas light switch on from memory, which is getting harder and harder to dig into nowadays, more forgotten than more remembered, I think. It's roughly the same. I think it probably slightly down last year, but as everybody who comes into the Christmas light switch on recognises that it is an incredibly, sort of powerful economic development tool for the council in terms of local people coming into the city centre, but actually from a lot of people coming from out with as well. But it probably is on about a par, I think, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor.
Sorry, Fiona.
Oh, sorry, yes. Ms Robertson, if you're online about the Perth Museum.
Thanks, convener. Yes, the Perth Museum construction phase of the project is complete. As you said, Councillor Drysdale, the project in total isn't complete. We're now into the exhibition fit out stage and the commissioning of the building. So I appreciate the building's getting a lot of interest because it looks as if it's completely finished, but there's actually quite a lot of work which will take us through to March next year to get done. But the construction phase is completed and was completed within budget. We are doing some final work to the exterior fabric of the building over the next few months, but apart from that, it's finished.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duff.
Thank you. My question is under the Tackling Climate Change and Supporting Greener Sustainable Places, and it's on page 34. And it's with regards to passive house standards. One of the key decisions in relation to recent new build projects, such as Riverside Primary, Blairgowrie Recreation Centre and Perth High School, was to opt to construct them to passive house standards. And indeed, Perth and Kinross Council must be the leading council, I think, in Scotland in this area now. Are there any indications as yet from Riverside Primary School about the reductions in energy use that we are seeing from our first passive house build? Thank you.
If Mr Crawford is online,
yes.
Head of Property, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duff, the Riverside Primary School has been open since June. We've only got 3 months of figures, and obviously we're commissioning the building at the time. It's too early to give you any definitive figures on its achieving energy targets, but given that it's a Passive House certified design, I've got evidence that the design has actually been built to that standard. As we're waiting final Passive House certification, I'm confident that we will be delivering the energy performance that was planned. But I, like everybody else, are very focused on and interested on probably at the end of the year being able to report on the energy performance.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Just have a follow-up. I'm just wondering, is there a lot of interest from other local authorities or other private organisations about our Passive House programme?
Yeah,
thank you.
If I can answer that, yes. There's so much interest that we had to manage the interest and the site visits from other local authorities and other contractors and government departments during the construction process that it was at one point was going to become a hindrance to achieving and delivering on programme.
Wow. Okay. Councillor Welsh is next.
Thank you, Convener. I'd just like to commend the layout of the document, the sort of content and clarity and the ability to interrogate information. I guess going forward, in terms of sort of developing actions and indicators or identifying the key actions and indicators, it's just to understand, you know, how best that's developed. An example of that is obviously the keen, you know, focus and clarity on, for example, a metric which was raised earlier around a drop in electric vehicles. But, you know, in terms of the overall sort of actions, that's one of a number of things that could have been identified there. And going forward, you know, how do we work together to ensure that we're understanding that?
Our Head of Innovation, Mrs. Guild, please.
Thanks for your question, Councillor. One of the things that we have been working on this year is a new corporate delivery improvement plan. So while that should be a look forward in terms of improvement actions on the back of the annual performance report, given the agendas for full council, it was felt that those would be split up this year. In future, you will see both of those come together, and what the new corporate delivery improvement plan will pick up on are all of the actions, like you've suggested, within the annual performance report that needs to be made a priority and looked at in the following year. So in October, we will be presenting our first corporate delivery improvement plan, or CDIP as we're calling it, for consultation before we take that more widely and then agree that hopefully before budget setting process.
Thank you, and thanks to Councillor Welch for actually commenting on the layout of the report. I was going to come on to ask members about that at the end, but we'll carry on with the questions for the moment. Councillor Massey, you're next. Hang on, sorry, apologies. I must be blind in the chat box to Councillor Allen. Councillor Allen, you're next.
It's really not a big deal. I'm sure Mr. Councillor Massey's question was just as equally important. On page 42 of the report, it talks about renewable energy and the use of biomass boilers. The report states that a number of our biomass boilers were offline during 22-23, and it also suggests that there are 2 still offline, but they were planned to be reinstated before 23-24 winter. Heard in the news as I was driving in this morning that it was -2 in Altnahara last night, and it was only 9 degrees when I got out of the car. So how are we getting on with that? Are they being reinstated?
I suspect this is a question for Mr. Crawford again.
Councillor Massey, I don't have that information to hand, but what I can do is take it offline and return and come back to you directly.
Thank you, Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Convener. My question is on page 46 of our pack, and it's looked after children. It's the very last paragraph talking about that we supported 171 young people who face disadvantage. Could someone expand on how we help these young people, and also of the 171, how many went into employment?
Thanks. So we've moved on from questions to the communities service to questions to ECS. So Director Devlin, if you would like to come in on this one, please.
Councillor Massey, in relation to your question about the specific kind of supports, I can give some examples. This work emanates from Scott Street, where youth services are based. And so the team from Scott Street work across all parts of Perth and Kinross with a range of other partners, Skills Development Scotland, Developing the Young Workforce, Duke of Edinburgh, a whole range of other voluntary organisations, third-party providers, to put in place a range of different skills. So whether that's construction, administration, car maintenance, a whole range of different kind of, I guess what you might call practical activities. Perth College, UHI Perth being another partner in the delivery of all of that. What we find then is these young people are able to sustain their learning in other areas as well for longer, which is great whilst participating in this work. What I don't have is the level of detail that you've asked for in terms of the number that have then gone into employment, but I can ask our colleagues in youth services if they have that and circulate that to all members of the committee following on from this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. My question's on the Stick to the Six campaign and the almost installed grey bin. So we got a lot of grief from the public about the Stick to the Six campaign, but it turned out to be the right thing to do, as the figures indicate to us. I wondered if we had any indication of what difference the new grey bin will make to our recycling rates, given that I certainly am getting some grief about it from my constituents.
Director Renton.
And not as much grief as I suspect I'm getting in the Renton household, but never mind. Clearly, you know, sort of council agreed a budget saving in terms of waste and what we were sending to what was landfill, but we will then need to send to be recycled differently. I don't have what percentage we're expecting to see. I know roughly what the monetary value of that would be, but I don't know what the actual percentage. But clearly the work that the team have done and the success of the Stick to the Six campaign ensures to me that the team are really spot on in terms of their thinking, and their, you know, sort of, and the rollout of the fourth bin will significantly reduce costs, bring in more income and help our recycling rates.
Yeah, thanks for that, Barbara. I agree with you entirely. I think that the issue is that the grief that we will get as elected members, and I'm certainly getting, not from you, although you are one of my, you do live in my ward, but I'm not had any grief from you, so that's reassuring. Thank you. It is really useful to go back to constituents and say, well, look, we did the Stick to the Six. This is the outcome of it. So it would be really useful if Barbara, if you could get that information to say, well, this is what we expect it to be. And I agree with what Barbara said. The team are absolutely spot on with this stuff. And if they say it's going to be an X percentage, I would take that to be factually correct. So it would be really useful to have that. Thanks.
I have advised Mr Renton not to approach any of the local ward members on the subject. But yes, we'll take that back. I mean, there is a very extensive media campaign, you know, sort of to allow our residents to understand a little bit more, because I understand the frustration that people have in terms of that. At the moment, we haven't had very many actual complaints through the system, but all of those we're picking up and going back to residents and trying to do exactly the same that we've done with the Stick to the Six campaign in relation to a bit more education, a little bit more understanding. But the view clearly is that if we're making the savings by recycling and encouraging people to recycling, then that helps the council's budget in general. And for things that mean that we might not have to reduce costs in other areas, or we might not need to make cuts in other areas as well. So I'll pick that up. I can't remember the full detail of whether that's covered in elements of the media campaign, but if it's not, we'll do that.
Thank you. And am I correct in thinking that actually there will be additional benefits in terms of increasing the amount that householders, or increasing the type of things that householders can recycle, and therefore not need to either put into the general waste or dispose of at certain collecting points, like the soft plastics recycling that you find at large supermarkets?
Yeah, that's exactly the process, and we're still working through what the contract will take and not take, but that's exactly the plan, that people can recycle more.
Thank you. And I understand that one of the other ward members for Director and Mr. Renton would like to come in, Vice Convener Bailey.
Thank you. And it's just to mention, Councillor Forbes, I had similar questions to you a few months ago, so just forwarded you an email chain with Sheila Best and some of her team. But I've done some digging there, and I'd be happy to share that with anyone else who wants to, because it would be FOIable anyway. And that's a great segue to the next report, but I'll hand back to you.
Okay. Are there any more questions on the annual performance report? No. Okay, if we can move on to comments. I see that Councillor Forbes has a comment to make, particularly, just as I mentioned before, in terms of the format or presentation of the report. If anybody other than Councillor Welch has any comments to make, I'm sure the team would be would welcome that as well. Councillor Forbes, you're first.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Just a couple of quick comments. Can I just put on record, I'm grateful to Barbara Renton for supplying me with the information I asked at full council regarding the play part situation. As you know, one of my favourite topics. Disappointed to learn that we've had only 144,000 from the Scottish Government, but we've got a couple of years left of the current Scottish Government to see if any more comes from them. And just going back to the grey bin issue, and I agree with everything that Barbara said. We were completely in agreement on this, and she talked about the cost savings, and whilst to all of us in this room that's really important, I do think we need to move the conversation with our constituents largely away from money, because actually sometimes I think the environment matters more, and I think if they hear us talking about saving money, it's just, oh yeah, the council trying to save some money again, or charging us more for council tax and so on. So I think our focus should be on our recycling rates and not quite so much on the budget saving. Thanks, Convener.
Thanks, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Convener. Just first and foremost, with regards to the style and layout of the report, which I liked, I would have to say, I think the landscape version with the two column style and the colour coding, I think it's a bit easier in the eye, and certainly a bit easier to read than just a straightforward A4 type report. I think the mix of having the information summaries at the start of the section, followed by the actual performance targets and the performance information, I think it helps to direct our attention to the relevant information in the reports. And I also thought the executive summary was a very good method, if you like, just to quickly scan progress in terms of the various targets, and which are on target, which are maybe not making the progress that we'd like to see. So I thought it, in terms of trying to get a very quick summary of how we are doing in relation to our performance, I thought it worked very well, I would have to say. If we could just take the opportunity to make a couple of comments about some of the content. There's a lot of good information about areas in which the council are doing well, but I continue to be impressed with the performance of our welfare rights team in terms of maximising income for our residents, with an additional £1.2 million of unclaimed benefits realised last year. And I think the 100% positive feedback in the service performance is well deserved. And I think it's good to see that the highest levels of accreditation continue for their work in advising and representing people with benefit decisions, court appeals and tribunals. And if I could also comment about the Open for Business and Adapt Your Property funds, I think I'm delighted to see the results of these funds, which have helped to enhance and repurpose commercial properties, bringing 3,500 square metres of commercial floor space back into use, converted 6 former commercial buildings into 23 residential properties, created over 200 jobs and bring a further £6 million of investment into Perth and Kinross. I think it's been a terrifically successful and popular initiative, which is always considerably oversubscribed, and we could do a lot more with some additional funding allocated to these areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Any further comments? If I can just then thank officers for being here to answer questions, but also the effort that goes into compiling the monitoring the data and compiling it and analysing it into this final annual performance report. Can we agree the report? Thank you. I'm now going to move on to the next item on the agenda. The discussion on the Freedom of Information Performance Report will be led by the Vice Convener, but if we can take a moment or two, just in case any of the officers in the Chamber were here for the annual performance report and don't need to stay for remaining items. Okay, item 6 on the agenda, Vice Convener Bailey.
Thank you. So we now have the Freedom of Information Performance Report 22-23. I'd like to hand over in turn to Lisa Simpson to introduce the report. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I'm actually going to hand over to Gillian Walker, who is the Information Rights Manager, who's responsible for that area and is also the Council's Data Protection Officer. She's going to introduce the report and give a bit more detail, but both of us will be happy to answer any questions.
Good morning, thank you. So this is the annual report on the Council's performance in relation to freedom of information requests, and I can reassure the committee that from an information governance perspective there are no significant areas of concern highlighted by the report. During 22-23 there were 1,573 requests for information which were handled under the relevant legislation, which represents a 15% increase on the previous year and is really a return to pre-pandemic levels. In terms of performance, 93% of the requests we received were responded to within statutory timescales, which shows a 5% improvement on the previous year. And just to provide some context, where timescales aren't met, this can be due to pressures within the relevant service, it can be due to the pressure of work in my team, and it can also be because requests are sent out, they're required to go to all schools, and the request arrives at the end of June, for instance, and there's just no way of getting the response out within the 20-day timescale. It in no way indicates that FOI isn't taken seriously throughout the Council. There were 399 requests where we didn't issue any information in our response, and this is almost always because we don't hold the information requested. We get a lot of requests where requesters go to all local authorities, sort of speculatively looking for information. It can also be because it's publicly available, in which case we just direct them towards our website or wherever the information is published. and it can sometimes be because of requested personal information, which we by law can't release to them under FOI. Once people have received their FOI response, they have the option to ask us to review it if they disagree with what we've provided. Only 2% of the FOI requests we responded to we were asked to review it. These were all responded to within statutory timescales. Requesters have a further right of appeal to the Office of the Scottish Information Commissioner, and during 22-23 there were 2 appeals to the Scottish Information Commissioner, but these were later withdrawn and no decisions were issued. I can absolutely reassure the committee that we're not complacent about our performance in relation to FOI. We're continuing to streamline our processes. We've recently, last month, introduced a new system which will automate and streamline many of our processes and allow us to place a greater emphasis on publishing a disclosure log of responses issued to FOI requests, which will improve the Council's performance in relation to transparency. I'm happy to provide any answers I can today and to get back with any more detailed responses if I can't. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So we have a few questions intimated. So Councillor Drysdale and then Councillor Allen after. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Thank you, Gillian, for your report. One of the last words you mentioned there is the key word for me, that of transparency, and that's what this is all about for me. Can you tell me, I don't see any information within the report on how this council's performance compares with other Scottish local authorities. It's clear to me that our performance is very good indeed, but can you clarify how that sits within the overall Scottish local authority figures? Thanks.
Thank you. There isn't a formal mechanism for sort of ranking how we perform when compared to other local authorities. However, we do submit statistics quarterly to the Office of the Scottish Information Commissioner, and we can view what other councils have submitted. And I can report that we compare favourably with many councils that are comparable to us in size and makeup. But I'm very happy to send you the link to where you can find that information after the meeting, so you can satisfy yourself of that. Thanks.
Thank you, that would be very useful, thanks.
Thank you, and then Councillor Allen, go ahead with both questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and Gillian for the report. Thank you. On page 80 at 4.15, it says where information was not provided to requesters, 15 requests were refused completely or in part on the grounds of excessive cost. What do we regard as being an excessive cost? Is it a straight estimate of the actual cost of providing the data, or is there some assessment of the importance of the request against the time taken that would be to provide that information? Thank you.
Thank you. It's actually set out in regulations that have been issued by the Scottish Government. So in terms of freedom of information requests, the figure currently is £600. If it's going to cost us more than £600 to provide the information, we can decide that we're not going to issue it on those grounds. For environmental information, it's a slightly different framework, and we can basically could say it's manifestly unreasonable based on the regulations that are issued in terms of freedom of information regulations. That's likely to change over the next year, because I think there's a recognition by the government that £600 back in 2005 is not the same as £600 now, but at the moment that's the figure we work to. Thank you.
Thanks. Please go ahead with your second question, Councillor Allen.
Thank you. My second question was basically at 4.17. It says a new case management system for recording and processing and reporting on information requests more efficiently will come into use in August 2023. I'm just asking, has that happened?
Yes, we introduced it on the 3rd of August and it's now up and running. It's really cut down on the amount of time we spend doing sort of manual renaming, filing tasks. It's allowing us to concentrate on much more on the quality of our responses, the speed of our responses, and it will also enable us to publish a disclosure log of all responses issued under FOI, which will in turn, as I've mentioned already, improve our transparency and perhaps reduce the number of slightly repetitive requests so we can direct people towards the disclosure log. They may see that the information they were looking for has already been published by the Council.
4.18, you mentioned that the data is in figure 4. It's actually figure 1. It's just a comment. That's it. Thank you.
Good spot. That's what scrutiny is about. Then Councillor Massey, please, next.
Thank you, Vice Convener. My question really follows on from Councillor Allen's on costs, and it's on page 81 of our pack, point 4.2. They stated that there were 2 appeals to the Scottish Information Commissioner. They were both withdrawn. Did we incur any costs? And if we did incur costs, are we able to get them back from the applicants?
In both these cases, the costs were fairly minimal, a few hours of officer time because they were withdrawn relatively early in the process. If they hadn't been, if they had taken a great deal of time, there is no mechanism for us to reclaim that cost. It just has to be borne, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson on the phone.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I was going to ask if there are certain areas of activity within the Council that generate more FOI requests than others.
There can be. I think at the moment we're having quite a few requests in relation to the new waste and recycling service, the grey lidded bins. There have been, if there are particular roadworks, for instance, taking place, we can sometimes get quite a few requests about that. But in general, it's quite hard to point to any specific themes. We get asked about anything and everything that you can imagine.
I'm surprised that you get FOI requests about roadworks. That seems really odd. You know, it's one, I would have thought there was better avenues. But I had a supplementary question also about cost, if I may, and that was, what's the average cost of an FOI?
We don't currently calculate that. We do keep a record. We ask services to record the time spent on fulfilling a request, and for the purposes of complying with the regulations I referred to earlier, the maximum we can charge in staff time per hour when carrying out any kind of calculation is £15. But as I say, we just don't record the cost of responding to them at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Forbes, I think you're next.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I've got a feeling my question was partially answered just a little minute ago, and it's about what we must get, I assume, is the same question asked over and over and over again. Do we publish the information, as in the question and the answer, on our website routinely and just direct people towards that?
We don't at present, but that's one of the things that the new system will enable us to do. It's a very time-consuming process preparing them and then getting them uploaded to the website. We've not had the resources, and I think there have been issues with the technical capacities of the website to be able to do that up until now. But as you're probably aware, the website has been upgraded and we've got this new system. When we have 3 months worth of request data in the new system, we intend to move towards publishing basically almost everything that we issue under FOI.
Thank you. And then Councillor Duff for a question.
Thank you, Vice Convener. My question's with regards to paragraph 4.10, which is on 79 and 80. It gives a breakdown of the number of requesters and how many requests they've been made, including one requester who's made 67 requests for information. Now, I'm presuming these are not requests in relation to the same subject, but is there such a thing as a vexatious requester? And do we have any people who are prevented from making FOI requests due to that reason?
Well, answering the question about the 67 requests from one person initially, they were on a variety of subjects, and the person was not just acting in an individual capacity. They were in no way vexatious. There is a definition of vexatious requests in the Freedom of Information Act. The bar is quite high. We have on occasion said to requesters, we regard your request as vexatious, its intention is to harass the council, and we won't respond to it. But luckily we don't have to do that very often.
Thank you, that's reassuring. And then Councillor or Convener Stewart, sorry.
Thanks. Maybe just to follow up to Councillor Robertson's question about average cost per request. If we don't measure cost directly, but we do measure time, what's the average officer time spent on a request? Or if we don't have that available, could we get that afterwards?
I would have to get back to you with that figure. And we are reliant on services telling us how much time they spend, and if they haven't done that, it wouldn't be possible to calculate the average cost, I'm afraid, but I'll see what I can find out and get back to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone. Any further questions? Okay, we'll turn over to comments then. Anyone wishing for a comment? There being no comments, then I'll sum up by thanking Gillian Walker, obviously, for preparing the report and for all the answers. That was quite a grinning. I think it's only right and proper that there's a very high bar for the measure of vexatiousness. And it's good news as well here that even though we've seen a 15% increase in the number of requests, we've achieved a 5% improvement in our on-time performance. So thank you for your work to you and your team. Then moving over then to the data protection compliance report, who's to introduce that one? Is that yourself, Lisa? Or yeah, Gillian again. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so the data protection report is my assessment of the Council's compliance with the UK General Data Protection Regulation. In terms of performance, there were 95 data breaches recorded during 2022-23. These are all taken very seriously, but that number does need to be considered in terms of the millions of transactions involving personal data, which are carried out every year throughout the Council. I can reassure the committee that services all work very closely with my team when data breaches are reported. There's a real emphasis put on improving processes to try and make sure that the same thing can't happen again. And we also work very hard to try and minimise any impact on individuals as a result of the data breach. When data breaches are reported to my team, we make a risk-based assessment of whether or not it reaches the threshold for reporting to the Information Commissioner's Office. And during 22-23, there were 6 breaches reported, and in all of these cases, the ICO considered that the Council had taken appropriate action, had satisfactory processes in place, and didn't require us to take any further action. Another main area of the team's work, which is reported on here, is providing responses to subject access requests, which are requests for personal information. And as you'll have seen, there was a 27% increase in the number of subject access requests received last year. Many of these are absolutely huge pieces of work with many thousands of pages of information. a lot of the information is not easy for my team to deal with. Many of the requests we're receiving currently arise from the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry and the redress scheme which is associated with this. We've put real effort over the last year to provide a really compassionate and empathetic service to people who approach us looking for details of their own information. Often the information can be many decades old. We may not be able to trace as much of it as we would hope to trace. We're trying to provide them individuals with details on where they may be able to find information if we don't hold it. And once again, I can assure the committee that there's absolutely no complacency here, and we're continually trying to improve the service we offer. And once again, I'm very happy to take any questions or get back to you with anything after the meeting if required.
Fantastic. Thank you for the introduction. Any questions? Councillor Annan, first of all, please go ahead.
Thank you for the report, and I think that GDPR presents lots of challenges for you. I'm going to ask what might sound like a daft question, but what are the known unknowns? What breaches have there been that we are unaware of? Is that something you can answer?
Sadly, the answer to that is no. But what I can reassure you on is that there are regular reminders to all staff through Eric and through managers briefing about what breaches are, how to avoid them. We've got new data protection training, which sets out very clearly what can be a breach. It's not just what people might think of as being a breach. We really try to, if people report a breach to us, we try to be supportive to them, because we've got some very conscientious staff who are often devastated when they realise what they've done. So we try to talk people through it, provide reassurance, provide them with training to minimise the chances of a breach happening again. I think in all large organisations, it would be foolish to say, you know, I know everything that's going on, but we do our very best to create an atmosphere where people can, a culture where people can approach us and let us know what's happened, even if they just have concerns about something. We'll always try and talk them through it and help them find a solution.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I didn't actually initially have any questions on this, but something's just drawn my attention. It's the appendix. Kind of reads in some way like an episode of Line of Duty. We talk about a covert human intelligence source, which I believe, having watched Line of Duty, is otherwise known as a CHIS. But the bit that really struck me was the ability the council has to monitor and intercept electronic communications. And I was looking for a bit more information on that. And it just also occurred to me, would councillors' emails ever be intercepted using these powers? Given that councillors are not employees of the council, I know we kind of sit in that odd bit where we're not employees, but we still have council email addresses. I just wondered if anyone had any information on that for me.
I think Lisa Simpson wishes to address that one. It's a good question.
The circumstances when we can do that are very, very limited and highly prescribed and set out in legislation. The test and the thresholds for doing that are very high, and we've never actually done any in the last 5 years. So technically, yes, but there would need to be a very good, compelling reason, and it would need to meet the legal threshold for that type of intervention. The reason why it's covered in this report is, by law, we must give notice of whether or not, even if there's been no activity in that, we must advise about the potential for covert surveillance and what our policy is, and that policy statement satisfies that statutory duty, but we haven't actually exercised that right in the last 5 years, and the number of people who can actually authorise it is slim, and it's me, and I've not agreed to any of it. So
Thank you. Was there anything to add? Councillor Massey next.
Vice Convener, can you go move on to the next question? I've lost my place there. I need to find it again. Thank you.
No problem. We'll come back around. Councillor Duff.
Thank you. My question was in relation to paragraph 4.4, and it was with regards to resourcing of this work. And I note that we've got increases in the complexity of subject access requests, for instance, and that the information rights team are directly accessing ECS records rather than the ECS staff carrying out this work. And it also states there's limited ability to provide general training. And I was just wondering if we had adequate resources or staff in place to fulfil the role, or whether there was some need to look further into that. Thank you.
I think it's challenging to do the work that we're required to do with the resources we have. But what I would say is, at any point where I have approached my manager and said we need more resources, there have been efforts made to redirect staff from other areas of work to assist us. And I know that I'm able to be very clear about my requirements, and Lisa will listen to me and try and help.
Thank you. I note the knowing look between yourself and the head of legal and governance there, but it's very reassuring that you've got access to additional resources if you need them. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Councillor Massey, are you set? Oh yeah, no worries. So convener, would you like to come in with your question?
Thanks, Vice Convener. It was a follow-up to Councillor Allen's question on unknown unknowns. I was wondering, in terms of breaches of which we're not aware, do we do any form of sort of internal auditing to try and pick up where breaches might have happened but haven't been reported or haven't been realised?
I think the range of activities which could lead to something being classed as a data breach is so wide, and the number of transactions is so huge, that in practice that would be difficult. However, through the activities of other parts of the council, such as internal audit, where processes have been examined, questions have been raised with my team about whether the activity of another area of the council is compliant with UK GDPR. So I suppose that's a sort of a yes and no answer. And we're always alert to any new processes. When any new process which is going to involve the processing of personal information, it's council policy that a data protection impact assessment is carried out. And as a result of that, we get quite involved quite early in the nitty-gritty of who can access systems, who can send things out, what safeguards are there in place. So we do a lot of preventative work in relation to data breaches as well.
Councillor Duff? Or Councillor Massey? Skip. Okay, no worries.
So yes, I've found the reference. I think it's in the right one. It's in the paragraph 6.3. It was about the number of requests at the 31st of March that were still pending. I think there was 57 awaiting further clarification from the requester. I just wondered how long we held these as pending before we just, close them and move on. Thank you.
In practice, they remain open indefinitely. There's no mechanism within the legislation for closing them down. But just to provide a bit of context, a number of these requests that are currently on hold are from people who have been in care in the past, and they've perhaps approached us with very minimal information. We've gone back to them to ask just a few more questions, and we're waiting for them to come back to us. And I think it would be fair to assume that in many of these cases, that's going to be quite a long process. And as part of the compassionate and empathetic approach we take, we just leave these open, and people can come back to us at any time.
Thank you. And then Councillor Welch for your question.
Thank you, Bailey. So there was a significant data breach with the PSNI in Northern Ireland, and obviously, you know, ultimately, I guess we don't quite know what the circumstances were, but obviously we'll be sort of safeguarding quite a lot of information that's got sort of safety issues related to it. Are there any different ways of protecting that information in terms of layering of authorisations that would hopefully prevent something like that happening within Perth and Kinross? Thank you.
I think that in the data breach in question, I believe it's my understanding that that was due to a response to a freedom of information request that was issued in an Excel spreadsheet. And it's a long-standing policy of my team that we convert everything to a PDF document, and anything that's sensitive is reviewed before it's issued. I also work very closely with the information security team, speak to them on a daily basis. So one of the principles of compliance for the GDPR is the security of information. So they are enmeshed. We take it extremely seriously, and we do have procedures in place that aim to minimise the chance of anything like that happening here.
Thank you, that's reassuring.
Thank you for the question. I was going to ask similar, so that's reassuring. One question from myself, actually, I'll jump in. There were some references made to the old records for the historical abuse inquiry and other topics. I don't know what the appropriate measure is of records, but to what degree do you, or maybe the way of asking this is to say what percentage of requests result in you, or, and I suppose this applies to FOI as well, result in you needing to go to a paper or a physical archive? Is there a physical archive somewhere below our feet or somewhere else in the county? Just a little detail on that, thank you.
Very few in terms of FOI. I could think of two this financial year so far, two requests that have resulted in paper files needing to be scanned. In relation to subject access requests, particularly in relation to historical childcare files, a lot of them still are in paper form and they're stored in the archives, who we work closely with. There are still some records that are awaiting scanning. I understand from for instance, private schools who've passed their records to us when they've closed. But there is a move towards digitising everything. The Council's Records Manager is working on that with his team at the moment. So I think the number number of records where paper records are involved will reduce substantially over the next year.
Thank you, that's good to know. And then Convener Stewart, go ahead.
Thanks. It was a follow-up to Councillor Welch's question. Have any of our data breaches arisen from responses to FOI requests?
No, thankfully.
Okay, thank you. So if there's not any further questions, I'll turn over for comments then. Any comments anyone wishes to add? Okay, I'll wrap up then by thanking Gillian Walker for your assistance again in all these questions. And we will agree the report. I would hope everyone happy to agree the report. Great, thanks. Back over to you, Convener.
Thanks, Vice Convener. So we're moving on now to item 8 on the agenda, which is the last item, which is the Clinical and Care Governance Assurance Report from the Health and Social Care Partnership. I'd like to ask Mr. Ogilvie, the Head of Adult Social Work and Social Care, to introduce the report. Thank you.
Good morning, thank you. This report is being brought to provide assurance on the clinical and care governance activities and arrangements across the Health and Social Care Partnership. And the timescale for data in the report is from the 1st of March 2023 to the 30th of June 2023. And the lead officer of the Health and Social Care Partnership suggests that the level of assurance provided is substantial. Care and Professional Governance Forum continues to meet monthly and, together with locality care governance arrangements, provides assurance on the quality, safety and effectiveness of all services delegated to the IGB. So updates on exceptions previously reported. Social work staffing capacity has improved significantly in the integrated discharge hub. During this time of this report, we recruited 2 whole-time equivalent social workers and 2 whole-time equivalent social work assistants. We've also continued with the use of agency staff to fill nursing vacancies. This is continuing, but at reduced levels as there's been improved recruitment for long-term posts. The vast majority of gaps in rotas are being filled, and where there are gaps, senior staff are covering on the floor as and when required. In terms of the red risks, we still have a risk relating to accommodation. This is being mitigated by the partnership working closely with NHS Tayside and Perth and Kinross Council colleagues. We're represented on the One Public Estate and the Smarter working groups, and the partnership itself has instigated a short life working group to focus primarily on or purely rather on partnership accommodation requirements, and a consultation paper is currently being completed. In terms of mental health workforce, the redesign of the community mental health teams is ongoing, and this will include medical professionals. There is still a significant shortage of consultant psychiatrists, and this is currently being mitigated by the use of locums. GP cover at HMP Perth, we now have 11 new locum GPs made available. We did offer enhanced payments, so that has resulted in a significant increase in GPs willing to provide locum cover. We are still looking at a new model for the longer term, and that model will include the use of advanced nurse practitioners. In terms of waiting times at HMP Perth, they have reduced significantly, and we've got extra capacity. 2 additional nurses have been recruited, and we are also undergoing recruitment for an advanced nurse practitioner, and agency staff are being used as required as well. Capacity and flow for older people, a working group's been set out to carry out a whole system review. A number of improvements have been actioned, and during the time of this report there was a steady reduction in bed days lost due to people being delayed by approximately 6 to 8% per week. Ongoing issues regarding the environment for our community care and treatment centre, which is currently based up at Beach Grove. And again, alternative accommodation is being sought, and that's tied into the first risk with regarding wider accommodation. In terms of care at home capacity, we still have significant unmet need. We have our care at home redesign, which is ongoing, and the number of people waiting a care package has reduced slightly. We also have a lack of OT capacity, which is resulting in assessment delays for OT aids and adaptations, and currently in the process of recruiting to 3 whole-time equivalent occupational therapy posts, which will ease that. During the time of the report, there was a shortage of social workers in the Kinross team as well, and there was a risk that urgent team pieces of work wouldn't be responded to within timescales. However, this was being mitigated by the use of an agency worker and other teams supporting as required. And again, there are 3 social worker posts which were being advertised. In terms of primary care services, 3 practices at the time of this report had closed lists. Primary care sustainability plan has been developed along with a strategic delivery plan to try and provide longer term solutions. Exceptions raised at recent Care and Professional Governance Forum meetings through the annual reports are listed in the report as well. In terms of adverse events, most of them are minor or negligible, and none of them are outstanding. The main themes are slips, trips and falls, medication, clinical challenge behaviour, violence and aggression, and pressure ulcers. 1 ongoing significant adverse event review, and that was regarding a person who completed suicide. In terms of complaints, and this is just relating to health information, we didn't have social work and social care information at the time of this report. Main themes are complaints regarding waiting times or delays in services, staff conduct, disagreement with assessments and quality of care. During the time of this report, there were 3 external inspections, and they were all at the older people mental health wards up at Murray Royal. It was Gary, Tummel and Leven wards. And again, overall, the feedback was positive. There were a number of recommendations made, and there are action plans in place to progress those recommendations. For medication assisted treatment standards, the recent benchmarking report from the Scottish Government gave Perth and Kinross amber for the first and the second standard, and progress in 3, 4 and 5 were given green. There have been a number, or rather there were a number of developments during the time scale of this report, such including a move to same-day prescribing, now being available 5 days per week. A standard operating procedure is also being developed to cover the rural areas, improve links with generic services to identify and support people at the highest risk. Staff have now been provided with carry packs to support harm reduction. Our substance use service caseloads have been reviewed, and actions identified to improve retention of people in services. And there's a local working group set up to improve integrated working between substance use and mental health services, and training delivered to increase awareness of the use of independent advocacy. And this supports a wider work across Perth and Kinross to try and reduce the number of drug-related deaths. In terms of public consultation, there has been a public consultation carried out in Bridge of Erne regarding primary care services. There have been over 600 responses, and they are currently being analysed. And in workforce, there are ongoing risks. I've mentioned in terms of the risks previously, there are a number of vacancies across the partnership, which again, we have a range of actions contained in our 3-year workforce plan, which we are implemented to try and improve recruitment and reduce the associated risk. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ogilvie. Can I go first to Councillor Drysdale?
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Kenny, for the report. I'm so pleased that this report is now coming to Scrutiny and Performance Committee and is receiving the public hearing it so richly deserves, and in particular for all 40 elected members rather than just for the members of the Integration Joint Board. I had a couple of questions, if I may, Convener, but they are entirely separate, so I'll ask the first one and then wait for the second one. My first question was in relation to the tables on page 101 of the papers at 2.3.2, which is in relation to the health red risks and the adult social work and social care red risks. I do take considerable assurance from the detail and the quality of this report. However, I can't help but notice that if you look at across these 2 tables, that the risk exposure rating, there's no improvement in any of them in the last 12 months. I appreciate that this is a national picture. I appreciate that we are looking at the local issues, but can you tell me whether, with all the work that is obviously being done in so many of these areas, whether there is light at the end of the tunnel and whether we can anticipate some degree of improvement in these difficult challenges in the year ahead? Thanks.
Yes is the short answer. Obviously, this is a historical report, and I can confirm that certainly in terms of the adult social work risks, 3 and 4, there has been significant improvement there, and they have reduced and are no longer red risks. In terms of 1 and 2, there is ongoing work there, and we are hopeful they will reduce soon. two is probably more likely to reduce than one. One being the care at home risk, and that has been challenging, and it's a significant challenge across Scotland. But we do have a comprehensive transformation programme looking at that. I'm confident that will deliver, but the timescale might be a bit longer for that. In terms of the health risks, again, there are mitigating actions there to improve, to prevent a further deterioration, and there are actions taken to try and improve. And yeah, there will be improvement across all of them, but again, that may take time and may take a bit longer. I don't know if my colleague Mark Dixon is online, if he's got anything further to add.
Yeah, thank you, Kenny. And I would really just echo what you've said, certainly for the health risks, the ongoing work in terms of the controls and the mitigations with a view to looking to, I suppose, especially reduce the likelihood scoring. But I suppose, these risks are, I suppose, quite significant and kind of wicked problems that are taking quite a while to control and mitigate, but certainly can assure the committee that that there's ongoing work to look to resolve these. I think that there is an improving picture, but not to the stage where we're comfortable reducing the level of risk at this stage.
Thank you for these answers. That's very helpful. My second unrelated question, well, it's related in a way, but it's in respect of the paragraph on drug-related deaths. Obviously, this is something that is very much in the public eye following the Lord Advocate's decision in the last couple of days that we can now move towards drug consumption rooms in Scotland following the political blocks that there have been in that. I'm interested, however, just looking at Perth and Kinross as compared to the Scottish-wide picture, and having done some sums while I was looking at this paper, I see that across Perth and Kinross the figure, whilst still too high, obviously any one is too high, is lower than the national picture, and has been consistently across the last 10 or 12 years. I guess my question is whether we can identify whether within Perth and Kinross the issues are spread across the population, or whether there are more issues with drug-related deaths in Perth and the towns, or whether the issues associated with rural living are also exacerbating drug problems for some people. In other words, is there a concentration on the towns and city, or is it across Perth and Kinross? Thanks.
Thanks. I mean, there's very much a concentration in Perth City. There's a very, as people are well aware, there's a very strong correlation between drug deaths and deprivation. And again, Perth City, in terms of Perth and Kinross, contains the most deprived areas in Perth and Kinross. That said, there are still issues in the rural area, and our challenge is being able to provide the service in Perth City, but also provide support to people in the rural areas. I mean, what we do find is that a lot of people in the rural areas are actually prefer to come into Perth City for support and treatment, because again, there's issues of anonymity, etc. But again, the challenge is there to make sure, we have a suite of options available, both in terms of treatment options and in terms of availability across the whole of Perth and Kinross.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Convener. Can I ask, first of all, there's very little reference made in this report to oral health, dental health, and that's one of the big pressures, especially in areas like where I represent. People just can't get access to NHS dental provision, and this apparently applies to the majority of the Perth and Kinross areas, but it's not represented in the report. Why is that?
Okay, I mean, certainly in terms of the Health and Social Care Partnership, we have strategic responsibility for public dental health, and that is different from the general dental provision. And again, it depends on our reporting mechanism as well. We have annual reports, and exceptions or risks from the annual reports are presented in these reports, and then we have exception reports as well from individual services. And the absence of anything feedback from the public dental service is probably just an issue of timing in terms of the 3-month time period of this report. Again, I'll maybe bring Mark in as well if he's got anything further to add.
Yeah, I think exactly that. So obviously within the partnership we have the public dental service, but the general medical services, the independent practitioners on the high street are somewhat separate to that, so wouldn't be included in this report.
Right, thank you. Because people now get the feeling that dental services, the majority of dental services are privatised, and there's very little access now to national health dental provision, especially in rural areas. My second question was about, I found this report quite grim reading, to be honest, and I spoke recently to one of our local GPs who was giving me a really hard time because he said that as a council we don't consult with local medical centres when putting down our local plans with regard to housing provision, and that puts more and more pressure on GPs and GP surgeries. Now, I said to him that I'm sure we did consult NHS Tayside, but can you say anything about what is done generally with regard to local plans and discussions with local GP practices rather than the NHS Tayside, who very rarely seem to respond to any consultation exercises?
And again, I think certainly historically there have been gaps in the process. Hopefully we are improving that. And for example, we've got our executive management team in the Health and Social Care Partnership, which meets every Thursday. And there is a paper coming this Thursday regarding 2 housing developments and the impact that that potentially will have on health and social care services, including GP practices. And the reason for the meeting is us to make sure we have consulted with all our colleagues in the partnership, and we're preparing a joint response, and we'll put that back to our planning colleagues, so at least they are aware of any potential impact of new housing developments.
Thank you. I find that reassuring, and because reading this report, your services are obviously under a lot of pressure, and if we as a council can work with the health practitioners to try and plan better going forward, it's surely going to ease the pressure that you currently have to live with. Thank you.
Thanks, and if maybe I could just follow up quickly. In terms of Councillor Robertson's questions there, this is a report on clinical and care governance assurance. Can I just check whether we consider access to services and waiting times for services where that might be where there might be limited access, or where there might be long waiting times, whether that becomes a clinical care issue, Kenny, Mr. Ogilvie?
Yes, it does, and again, it's where the dividing line is between performance information and then care governance concerns, and that there's not a hard and fast cut-off point. There are probably grey areas in the middle. But again, if you look at the red risks, there is a red risk, for example, regarding waiting times for access to assessments for OT aids and adaptations. So yeah, there is a certain point, and again, it's not clearly defined, but there is a point beyond which there are concerns that people are waiting so long that there is a potential clinical and care risk, so that then gets fed up to the the Care and Professional Governance Forum to try and take any necessary actions to mitigate it that services below haven't been able to do themselves.
Thanks very much. Councillor Allen, you're next.
Thank you, Convener. On page 107, it talks about slips, trips and falls, and there's a nice graphic there that tells us about results back to January 2022. In the next paragraph, it goes on to say the psychiatry of old age inpatients wards at Murray Royal Hospital experienced a higher than usual number of falls at the end of 2021. So we don't see that in the chart. However, it goes on to say several patients who had multiple falls. It says many of which were controlled. Don't quite understand that. Can you help me understand what a controlled fall is? Thank you.
I might bring my colleague Mark in here. My understanding is there could be a controlled fall. Someone can maybe get up and they can either have staff support or they're able to put their hands on their, say for example, the end of the seat, and they still end up on the floor. So it is still officially a fall, but again, there's less chance of them injuring themselves. But I'll bring Mark in if that's okay, Mark.
Yes, so that's my understanding. So a controlled fall is where somebody, either a member of staff or somebody helps them to the ground. So it's not they're not falling in an uncontrolled manner. So yeah, that's what it is.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. Kenny, I think if I understood you correctly, you referenced 11 new locum GPs at Perth Prison. And my understanding of a locum GP, and correct me if I'm wrong, is someone who's self-employed and will work for whichever GP practice needs them for an agreed fee and then move on somewhere else. We seem to really struggle to get GPs in the wider community. We've certainly, in my ward in Invergowrie, we've closed the surgery there, and I know similar situations arising in Methven. So I'm just wondering, do we pay the GPs who service Perth Prison more, or what's the reason that it seems to be easier to get them there rather than other places?
Yeah, yes, we've basically enhanced the payment to try and attract people into work in the prison. I think my colleague Lisa Milligan's on, who's the service manager for primary care. Don't know, Lisa, do you want to add any more to that one?
So Kenny, Lisa, she is kind of waiting in the wings, but she wasn't able to join the call. But I think yeah, what you said there, Kenny, I mean, certainly the 11 locum GPs, that was really just because of the enhanced payments. I know that there's work ongoing to try and secure salaried GPs for prison healthcare.
Yeah, thanks for that. So the enhanced payment, is that available for the wider community? You know, if we took a decision that we actually really need a GP surgery in Invergowrie after all, or Methven or wherever, would that enhanced payment be available to get locum GPs to service these kind of surgeries?
I would need to pass that to Lisa. She's got more details in the ins and outs of GP payments and GP contracts, and where the NHS Tayside responsibility, etc. comes. The difference with prisoner healthcare is a delegated service to the Health and Social Care Partnership.
Okay, I think you've unfortunately just given me another question then. So my knowledge of this is poor, I apologise. So does that mean that regular GPs in the community are not then? I assume that's what you mean.
The contract, and again, I'll maybe get Mark to come in and assist me here, but the contract sits with NHS Tayside. The strategic responsibility is, the lead partner is the Angus Health and Social Care Partnership. But obviously local GPs work within the Perth and Canos Health and Social Care Partnership.
Thanks. It is particularly with primary care, it is a very complicated picture. It is a very complicated picture, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Duff is next.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. My question is not leaving the subject of prison healthcare. On page 105, there's a bullet point there that says that Home Office controlled drug licences are outstanding for all 3 establishments. I just wondered if there was any particular information as to why that should be, and what the impact within prison healthcare is. Thank you.
It's purely administrative and certainly not on the partnerships side. Applications were made, they're still being processed. But what happens is temporary licenses are granted, so the impact on the ground is nil.
Thank you. And a further question from Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, thank you for indulging me with a third question. Having very recently lost my mother-in-law to dementia, not in Perth and Kinross, but in Fife, I'm particularly concerned to note that there are ongoing issues with delayed discharges due to lack of dementia care home step-down beds. My mother-in-law passed comfortably in a care home tended to by staff who knew her well, and whilst that was distressing, it would have been far more distressing had she passed in a general hospital, which is obviously so busy. We're aware that in Perth and Kinross the demographic profile is such that we're going to have many more older people who are happily living longer, but therefore increased cases of dementia can be predicted. So therefore, both in the short term and in the longer term, what can we do, what are we doing to address this lack of step-down beds? Thanks.
I mean, certainly it's step-down beds, and you know it goes further. It's permanent beds in care homes, EMI beds as they're called, which we have a shortage of in Perth and Kinross. In the short term, our commissioning team have been working with the local care home providers, and we have got 2 care homes in Crieff that are willing to open up, or have agreed to open up specialist dementia wings in their care homes. So that will be increasing capacity in the near future. It would be good if we could identify care homes, certainly in Perth City as well, to do the same. But you know, those conversations are ongoing, and as I said, there are 2 care homes identified and have agreed to do that. So they are currently undergoing that work and should be opening up in the near future. We also have a transitions nurse, which we've fairly recently employed, and she's based at Murray Royal, and she has been working with the care homes when people have been moving from Murray Royal to the dementia beds in the care homes, and she, you know, she's been focusing on the people with sort of more challenging behaviour, and that's been really successful in helping move people from hospital to a care home, supporting the staff to support the person in the care home, and you know that's reduced the number of people being readmitted significantly. So that work's having an impact in the short term. In the longer term, we have got our partnership transformation programme, and improving dementia services is one of the 6 key areas that we're focusing on. So that will be improving a whole range of services supports for people with dementia, you know, at the higher end in terms of specialist support, in terms of care homes, but also right down to the more preventative work as well, to try and reduce the numbers of people who are actually developing dementia, or you know, trying to support people so they're developing it later in life. We were at a recent meeting with health professionals, and they were saying, you know, up to a third of dementias are actually preventable. A lot, certainly the vascular dementias, are related to lifestyle. So if we can get in early, and that's where we need support from our wider community planning partnership colleagues. And again, in the LOIP, there are actions around physical and mental health, you know, encouraging people to adopt healthy lifestyles at a younger age. That then helps reduce the chance or the risk of developing dementia in later life.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Allen, you wanted to follow up on that issue?
Thank you. It's a good point, and it's one that I've brought up previously, and made it clear that there is accommodation at Parkdale in Auchterarder. They've got a vacant wing and beds available. It's ideal for this very problem. So I'd share that here. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you. And I had a question as well, which is on page 106 of our document packs. It relates to the one of the key exceptions in Perth City, where there's been an increase in adult protection concerns of 87%. That seems like an extraordinary number, an extraordinary increase. Is there what's prompted that, and how are we addressing that increase?
I mean, again, what we're looking at to try and identify specific issues behind that. A lot of those concerns were related to people with mental health issues, and we're not too sure of the exact reason is the short answer, but a lot of that increase was people with mental health issues and VPRs coming in from our police colleagues.
Okay, thank you. Have we got any more questions on the report? Nope. Can I invite any comments if there are any? Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I just want to reiterate the point I made earlier during one of my questions, just how important I personally believe it is that we have this report to this committee in this format, because there are so many issues contained within this that are within the oversight of all elected members. And I look forward to receiving future reports of this and hopefully seeing some improvements in some of the key indicators as previously mentioned. But in particular, it's just this wider airing among elected members and with the general public that I find so important. So thanks for bringing this report forward.
Thanks, Councillor Drysdale. I completely agree. There was previously a gap, certainly where we weren't. I mean, I know that obviously some of the more interesting things are maybe health related rather than social work, social care related, but there was certainly a gap previously where we weren't as a council scrutinising those social work and social care functions. Councillor Forbes, you wanted to come in?
Thanks, Convener. I want to return very briefly to the topic of GP availability, which I asked a question on. I think it's an area of importance to myself, to Bailey. Both have a surgery closing our ward. Councillor Illingworth, who's online, who has a surgery closing, or maybe already has closed, I'm not sure, in his ward. It feels to me that inadvertently we've just run a test. It feels to me that we've offered locum GPs enhanced payment to work in a certain environment, and that has resulted in a successful outcome, which is fantastic for the prison service. Feels to me the logical conclusion to that is that we offer that same payment to GPs to come and work in our community. And I think as a society we have a shortage of GPs as well as many other people in the medical sector. And I think Councillor Allen spoke at previous full council about his daughter who didn't qualify for the Scottish Government's so-called free tuition service and went to study in England, and of course was then snapped up as a consultant at a hospital down in England. So I think as a society we need to revisit this. This whole system is unbearably complicated. I mean, I don't understand it. I'd question if many of us really understand how this all comes together. So I think just as a society we need to give this a lot more thought and try and find a solution to this, but it feels to me the solution's there, and the solution's in enhanced payments.
Thanks, Councillor Forbes. I think we're probably straying beyond clinical and care governance, but I do appreciate, as I was trying to draw out in one of my supplementary questions earlier, that access to services can become a clinical care matter. So there is a relevance, and perhaps it is worth just taking the time or taking a moment in response to your concerns to say that there is currently a primary care premises consultation open, and to encourage all members and to encourage their residents and in the local areas to complete that consultation, which I think is open until the 15th of October. I have noticed that there will be some areas where Perth and Kinross I think the first question in the consultation is about which GP practice you're registered with, and it only lists Perth and Kinross GP practices. So there will be some people who won't be able to complete the questionnaire, but we can maybe take that discussion slightly offline. Did you ever, were you going to come back with a comment?
I was just going to point out that most people in Invergerry are now registered with a Dundee doctor, and therefore the survey is kind of pointless to them. But you said that already. Thanks, Convener.
That's fine then. Mr. Ogilvie, did you want to come in with a point?
Yes, I just wanted to ask, is the committee able to give an opinion on whether or not they agree with the Chief Officer's recommendation that substantial assurance is provided by this report?
I was just going to come on to that.
Sorry, apologies.
No, that's all right. So if there are no further comments on the report, is the committee happy to agree that substantial assurance is provided at this time? Agreed? Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you to Mr. Ogilvie and Mr. Dixon for, well, thank you for compiling the report and for being here to answer our questions. If there are no further points or comments from anybody, I believe that concludes the business for the meeting today. Thank you all for your attendance and for having obviously gone through the papers in so much detail and coming up with the questions. And thank you to officers for being on hand, having compiled the reports, being on hand to be here to answer the questions. Thank you all.